Have you seen this version of the Darth Maul and Obi-Wan duel? I'm talking about the original version of Darth Maul's death when he fell down the pit in one piece to stay family friendly. But there's more. When searching through the behind the scenes documentary, we can find 3 new moments in this scene. The first is this extended version of their fight in the hangar bay, then a move where Darth Maul slashes at Obi-Wan's feet, and finally Darth Maul throwing Obi-Wan into the melting pit with his sheer strength rather than the Force. And while I couldn't find the footage for this, Maul was supposed to throw objects at Obi-Wan with the Force. This is just one of 27 deleted, extended, and alternate scenes from episode 1, which this video will explain. But we'll look at the Battle of Naboo more later. Let's first take it back to the opening scene of this movie. After Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan arrive on the Trade Federation Lucrehulk, we were going to get 2 different extra moments. One has been labeled Trash Talking Droids and features PK-4 and EG-9, 2 droids that feature in what is possibly the most useless conversation I've ever seen in a movie.
They must be important.
A Republic cruiser. That's trouble, don't you think?
I'm not made to think.
But not all of the scenes I will analyze today are fully intact. Some, like the inclusion of exotic birds in the conference room that the Jedi walk into, can only be found in still images that make us wonder what these could have looked like. Another good example of this is with Obi-Wan's arrival on Naboo, because if you remember, after being attacked by droidekas, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan sneak on board the transport ships to go rescue the Queen, but this deleted moment would have added 2 distinct differences from the finished movie. Rather than cutting from the invasion of Naboo to Qui-Gon saving Jar Jar, we would have seen Obi-Wan emerging from a swamp in his own scene, and then also a moment that mirrors Obi-Wan scolding Anakin about losing his lightsaber in Attack of the Clones, because Obi-Wan's lightsaber would actually short out, with Qui-Gon reminding Obi-Wan about the importance of it. We would even get a scene featuring Obi-Wan and Darth Maul with lightsabers drawn on Tatooine, created exclusively for promotion, but more on that later. We still have some deleted scenes on Naboo and in space to cover first. The Waterfall Sequence is pretty well known by most Star Wars fans, and I'm really glad it was cut, because here we see the Jedi and Jar Jar emerge in the bongo here when all of a sudden they are swept towards a deadly waterfall. The Jedi deploy a cable to climb to the nearest wall, but Jar Jar is terrified and actually doesn't jump out until the last second, swimming past some native dew fish. This scene doesn't add anything to the story, and it feels completely contrived, sort of like another scene found in Attack of the Clones.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
And if I should cover the Attack of the Clones deleted scenes next, then let me know in the comments, because there are some interesting ones, like meeting Padme's parents and hearing about Dooku's backstory, although none of these are as fire as Anakin fighting Greedo on Tatooine. However, to disguise his identity as a Jedi while in Mos Espa, Qui-Gon actually had to wear this farmer disguise here. In this deleted moment on the Naboo ship, we would have seen Qui-Gon put this gray poncho on here. I can definitely see why this was cut, as we by no means need to explicitly watch this outfit change happen. But as if there weren't enough Jar Jar being scenes in this movie already, we originally would have had this scene of Jar Jar becoming discombobulated aboard the Naboo Royal Cruiser, falling over and tumbling into walls. Then Darth Jar Jar strikes back, with a moment of him juggling equipment in Watto's shop. This isn't the only thing different about this scene with Watto. The dialogue between him and Qui-Gon in the scrapyard would have been extended, and also Qui-Gon was at one point going to pull out an RPG. Okay, that last detail may or may not have been AI, but you have to admit that adding all 3 of these moments to Watto's shop will make this scene better.
No, they won't!
But I bet there is one scene you have been waiting for this whole time. That's right, more screen time of Qui-Gon gambling so that we can see the full extent of his gambling addiction. But hey, you know what they say, 99% of gamblers quit before their big high. All jokes aside, this deleted scene is a low-key chopped.
I'm betting heavily on Sebulba!
I mean, the Phantom Menace already gets complaints about being boring, and unfortunately, this scene would have only slowed down the pace. I mean, do we really need to watch Watto contemplate this decision for 30 seconds?
The boy and his mother.
A pod for slaves? Well, perhaps, Just one. The mother, maybe. The boy isn't for sale. Well...
In case you haven't looked into the Star Wars deleted scenes at all, the pod race is actually very notorious for being a nightmare when it comes to all of the deleted scenes here. See, George Lucas has always been a huge fan of racing since he participated in underground racing as a teen in California in the early 1960s. However, the full uncut pod race sequence is 18.5 minutes. That's including this scene called Dawn Before the Race, which shows Padme waking Anakin up, as well as Kitster hooking up the pods to his Eopie to bring them over to the track.
Your mother wants you to come in and clean up. We have to leave soon.
Hi, Annie.
But what if I told you there's an extended version of the Podrace Lap 2, which shows Sebulba using a flamethrower on the side of his vehicle, which he uses to crash the racer Clegg Holdfast. No, not Clegg, but before this scene we were to get an extended introduction to every racer. This revealed a disturbing aspect of the scene that many fans don't know about, which is that Rats Terrell, the Alina racer in this scene, had his whole family there at the pod race who were rooting for him to win. Unfortunately, Rats would be killed when his pod racer crashed into a cluster of stalactites at the Laguna Caves. But have you ever seen the original Fode and Beed who commentate throughout the pod race? Well, they were actually going to have live action heads added onto CGI bodies, showing portrayers Scott Capurro and Greg Proops, who were both comedians. But the marriage of live action to CGI elements was not smooth, and Fode and Beed were made entirely CGI. They are low-key kinda terrifying. Like, just imagine one of these guys popping outside of your window at night. But funny enough, the original Fode and Beed action figure used their original look. However, in that extended lap 2 I mentioned before, Sebulba would also use those same flame jets on Anakin, who would barely escape. I promise that sound effect wasn't added in there by me. Also, we would have seen more screen time from the Tuskens, as well as a moment with Jawas scavenging the wreck site. Now, we all remember Anakin's victory at the end of the pod race, but not everyone believed Anakin's win was legitimate. After this deleted moment with Qui-Gon taking longer to lift Anakin out of the pod, we would have seen Annie use the dark side for the first time. I mean, not really the dark side, but at least we get to see some of the early anger and resentment in Anakin when he beats up Greedo as a kid, who accused Anakin of cheating.
What's this all about?
The fact that Anakin grew up with Greedo is kind of crazy, to be honest, but Qui-Gon actually makes this scene even better by giving Anakin some advice on being able to take other people's opinion.
You'll just have to tolerate his opinion. Fighting will not change.
If only Anakin had listened to Qui-Gon here.
Anakin, Chancellor Palpatine is evil!
Your power significantly outweighs mine. Okay?
After walking out of Mos Espa, at some point, Qui-Gon and Anakin come across something that makes them start to run at a fast pace towards the Naboo starship. Our next deleted scene, Farewell to Jira, finally explains this, because after saying goodbye to the old lady Jira, who Anakin gives some credits to, in order for her to buy a cooling unit, which was a piece of technology that cooled items. I know that is some pretty crazy stuff, but afterwards, some of Darth Maul's probe droids approach, warning Qui-Gon that there was someone after them. And fun fact, we can actually see one of these probes fly behind Qui-Gon as he talks to Watto after the pod race in the final movie. But after running to the ship, Darth Maul attacks, flipping off of his speeder bike and engaging in a brief duel with Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon then leaps onto the ramp, escaping with relative ease. The original scene plays out much differently. You see, after Qui-Gon leaps up, Darth Maul was to follow, jumping after him, and as the two engaged in a vicious blade lock, the ship would start to take off. But this was cut short when Qui-Gon pushed the Sith out of the ship into the sand below. I'm honestly mad we didn't get a Tom Cruise hanging off the side of the plane situation here. Earlier I mentioned an image of Darth Maul fighting Obi-Wan on Tatooine, but unfortunately this was only created for promotional reasons and doesn't actually come from any scene in the movie. Although it is funny how Obi-Wan just straight up disappears for 40 minutes of the film without doing anything. Once arriving on Coruscant in the original movie, we literally only get like 2 shots introducing the planet. It wasn't until the DVD version when the air taxi scene was added back in, which shows about 20 additional seconds of Coruscant cityscape, which I personally like because this is such an incredible and important planet that I feel like it deserves a significant introduction personally. However, one element that many fans hated being introduced in the Star Wars prequels was R2-D2's rocket boosters. What if I told you they were almost in the Phantom Menace? Yeah, because there was at one point a moment of R2 falling off of a landing platform before then flying back up using these, but the practical effects for this moment were unusable when filming began. In the Phantom Menace script, it reads, R2 whistles a happy tune as he leans over the edge of the platform, watching the traffic. Suddenly, he leans over too far and falls overboard. After a moment, he reappears, using his onboard jets to propel him back onto the landing platform. During the Senate scene in the film, we were originally going to see Bail Organa make his first appearance, and not in the way you may think. Because in this original scene, we were to get a character named Bail Organa from Alderaan who was to second the vote of no confidence. However, he was not played by Jimmy Smits, but rather Adrian Dunbar, who is an Irish actor like Liam Neeson. Later on, the name was changed to Bail Antilles for the character in this scene, but in the original script, it was Bail Organa. But whatever happened to Chancellor Valorum? Well, we were, according to Wikipedia, to see a moment of him confronting Palpatine after the vote of no confidence. The interesting thing about his departure is that in the lore, Valorum had slowly been seeing less and less support, and by 32 BBY, he had no real friends left to turn to, except one, Palpatine. Therefore, he was especially betrayed when Palpatine, who was the one person he could count on, outmaneuvered Valorum and stabbed him in the back. In the script for scene 132, which is the Senate meeting, Valorum was originally going to say,
Palpatine, I thought you were my ally, my friend. You have betrayed me. How could you do this?
Also in the Senate scene, we were at one point going to get a brief moment with the Ithorian Senator Tendau Bendon speaking. Similarly, we were to get a moment of Yaddle from the Jedi Council talking to Saesee Tiin and Evan Peel in the extended council scene. This would have at least shown more than just Yoda, Mace Windu, and Ki-Adi-Mundi talking on the council for once. The fact that even the Clone Wars was bad about this most of the time kinda ticks me off. But speaking of characters who never talk, next up is a line from Darth Maul that was used in a TV spot trailer for the film but never in the actual movie.
Fear attracts the fearful, the strong, the weak, the innocent. Fear is my ally.
It would have been cool to see Darth Maul have more dialogue in this movie. But in case you're new to the channel, this is the segment where I give some brief self-improvement advice, and if you want to get back to the main video, then you can skip to this time right here, because we are actually covering Mark 9:35 in the Bible, and I know that's not everyone's thing. Now, in the Bible it says, talking about Jesus of course, he sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." This is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. What is extremely interesting and, important to me in this is I feel like I, as well as many of you for sure, am a very, competitive person in the sense that I'm always trying to be the best, with YouTube, Star Wars YouTube, compared to other YouTubers and anything like that, trying to be the biggest, the most jacked guy in the school, best well-dressed, all these things, right? Always trying to be number one, but I think one thing that I have a big problem with is that I kind of have established a selfishness in the sense that my drive to always be number one, I kind of like push away, you know, almsgiving or like, you know, doing favors for people, things like that, where it's like, you know, biblically you are supposed to do these things, but I'm just so driven, so obsessed with being number one in all these different categories of life that I'm not really thinking about it. So keep this in mind, that according to the Bible, you should, you know, serve others, help others, and think about others before yourself, which is extremely difficult. And I'm not trying to be like, you know, just do this, you know, it'll happen overnight. No, it's very difficult, but just keep it in your mind, and you can train yourself to do it if you're always thinking about it and making, you know, actions, taking action to improve this aspect, which is, you know, definitely something that a lot of people, including myself, struggle with. But getting back to the video, this is just a quick reminder that you can like the video if you enjoy it, and yeah, let's get right back to it. According to Wikipedia, there were to be scenes of Anakin's precognitive powers in the film, so him getting visions of the future, but I can't think of anywhere that this would make sense except for maybe him seeing his mother's death before leaving Tatooine, which would explain his fear regarding her later in the movie. Next are some mysterious images of Darth Maul with Nute Gunray, as well as some unnamed Neimoidians. Again, we are grasping at straws here, but originally there was a plot point where the Queen lands in the Naboo swamp and programs the ship to land in the Theed Palace courtyard as a distraction. The scene would show Maul and the Neimoidians' reaction to this. Skipping to the end of the battle, we were to see even more shut-off droids, this time in the Theed Palace, where Padme would inform Nute Gunray of his impending trip to Coruscant.
Now, Viceroy, you're gonna have to go back to the Senate to explain all this.
Around the same time, Anakin would land in the Theed hangar bay after the other confused pilots who just witnessed this boy blow up the control ships from the inside out to wait for him. A cool fact that this reveals about the space battle is that Rick Ollie, the royal pilot of Naboo, was actually one of the pilots in this very battle. It would have been cool to see a friendship between him and Anakin in the film. I mean, maybe they could have like dapped up in this scene or something, I don't know. But this would have felt very out of place considering that Qui-Gon just died and Anakin is over here like, I'm not gonna get myself in trouble, am I? But another element from Naboo that actually has a disturbing backstory are these statues which represent the former inhabitants of Naboo. But what happened to them? And why do the Gungans worship them? Well, to find out the answer to this and also 11 other hidden details from the Phantom Menace, click this video on screen now.
Do it.